Disclaimer: not everything is 100% accurate. Some dates for certain events are contradictory, even by Tolkien himself, left for interpretation or guess. Some events has been interpreted by myself, such as travel times, from where certain characters traveled, paths, etc. Details of considered not vital has been left out. Some details of found cool has been represented. Part 4 ended just as Théoden's army got led by a secret path to the Pelennor Fields, by the Woses, and the Battle of the Pelennor Fields was just about to commence. March 14. Sam managed to find Frodo in the tower, after the orcs in the tower had been fighting over Frodo's mithril mail, which he had received from Bilbo at Rivendell. The fighting spread throughout the tower and most of the orcs on both sides were killed. Sam found Frodo in the topmost chamber, and he returned the One Ring to him, dressed him and gathered food and gear, and they left the tower. Minas Tirith was now besieged. The defenders of Minas Tirith watched all day as the hosts of Mordor dug pits and set up siege weapons beyond their range. At first they mocked the supposed foolishness. But, as the Nazgul continued swooping near the city and uttering cries of death, their morale dropped. The Mordor host then used their siege engines to launch stones at the city, many of which burst into flame as they came crashing down. Then, the heads of all those that had been slain in battle were flung over the city. As most conflict had been concentrated in the south, north had also been busy fending off attacks, as the dwarves of Erebor and the Bardings refused to acknowledge the overlordship and alliance of Sauron. King Brand of Dale and the dwarves of Erebor had held attacking forces of Easterlings at Carnan, but this day they managed to cross and push them back to Dale. The combined forces of the men and the dwarves, under King Dain Ironfoot, marched out to meet the Easterlings in battle at the feet of Erebor. The armies fought bravely before the gate of Erebor, which was not taken. Aragorn's company set sail for Minas Tirith and Théoden's army reached Grey Wood just outside of Pelennor Fields. March 15. Minas Tirith had been under heavy siege, the city was undermanned, and its defenders had little hope. Denethor knew about the ring and he was aware of Frodo's mission. A few days earlier, he had accused Faramir of condemning his people to certain death, and he told Gandalf that on this matter he would have decided to hide the ring. Not to use it or to destroy it, but to hide it. After Faramir's body had been brought to him, nearly dead, Denethor gave in to despair and seemed not to be interested into anything but his son's life. His will snapped. He abandoned leadership of the city and prepared a pyre for him and Faramir. Gandalf removed Faramir from the pyre, and when Faramir called his name, Denethor seemed willing to abandon his suicidal designs. But suddenly he raised up the Palantir and prophesied the doom of Gondor, acknowledging that a new enemy was about to arrive, the pirates from Umbar. The Great Gate was breached and the last ruling steward, Denethor II, burned himself in despair. As the hope was low in the city, the horns of the Rohirrim echoed. As around 6,000 of their riders joined the battle, King Théoden's charge drove the Mordor forces from the northern half of the field. When the Witch King's flying fell beast attacked King Théoden of Rohan, the king's horse fell with the king atop him, and the horse landed on him, mortally wounding him. As the fell beast readied to devour Théoden, Éowyn, disguised as the warrior Durnhelm, stood firm, forbidding the Witch King to defile the king's corpse. The Witch King mocked him, telling him that no living man might hinder him. She threw off her disguise and revealed herself as no man at all, and drove her sword into the Witch King's crown, her sword shattering and the Black Captain of Mordor slain, his spirit fading into a shrill voice on the wind. This day King Théoden died in battle. One of the visions that Denethor had seen was of a fleet of enemy ships with black sails arriving at the landings to the south of the Pelennor, but he had not seen that they were actually manned by Aragorn and his company and many reinforcements from the south. Without the Witch King's leadership, and with vast numbers encroaching them on all sides, many of Mordor's troops panicked and began to flee. Aragorn's army then linked with Éomer's, and with their aid, the tide of battle was finally turned. Despite the orcs engaging in a cowardly and disorganized retreat, many Easterlings and Haradrim held their ground and fought proudly to the death. Soon Sauron's forces were emptied in the Pelennor fields and a brief respite was won. Sauron waged a multi-front war. Minas Tirith, an assault on Lothlorien earlier, attacks on Rohan and the Battle of Dale. This day he also unleashed a second assault on Lothlorien and the Woodland Realm, with orcs from Dol Guldur. The Wood Elves in Lothlorien held strong and repelled this attack. Another long battle took place in Mirkwood when Thranduil's realm was invaded, and a great ruin of fire. In the end, Thranduil took the victory and the Elves of Mirkwood won. The Battle of Dale continued. Frodo and Sam began their journey north along the Morgai. March 16. As the imminent threat to Minas Tirith was resolved, Aragorn held the last debate, a council with Aragorn, Imrahil, Gandalf, Éomer, Elladan, and Elrahir. Halbarad had fallen in battle. It was held outside Minas Tirith, and there it was decided that they should set forth on the second morning from that day with 7,000 men if these might be found, to fight Sauron in the Battle of the Morannon, in the hope that Frodo and Sam might finish the quest of the ring in Mordor. Frodo and Sam continued north. March 17. In the Battle of Dale, tidings turned. After 3 days of heavy close-quarters fighting, on this day, Kingbrand fell. As King Dane Ironfoot stood defending the body of his ally, he was also killed. The Easterlings were victorious and many dwarves and men were forced to retreat towards the Lonely Mountain. The defenders of the mountain were besieged. On March 18, the army of the west left Minas Tirith to face Sauron at the Black Gate. After Osgiliath, they ended the day march, but a vanguard continued to the crossroads. Orcs marched on the road from Durthang to Udan. Frodo and Sam came in sight of the Eisenmouth. There they were overtaken by an orc troop and had to follow their trot. The following day, March 19, the army of the west reached the Morgul Vale. The captain stationed a strong force of archers at the crossroads to guard against any attack from the east or south. Frodo and Sam escaped the orcs and began their journey along the road to Barad-dûr. On March 22, the third assault on Lothlorien commenced. The orcs caused much destruction on the wood's borders, but the valiant Galadrim routed them utterly, and the realm remained safe for the following days. Frodo and Sam left the road and turned south towards Mount Doom. On 23 March the army exited Ithilien, and along the way some 1,000 faint-hearted men who would not approach the Black Gate, were dismissed and commanded to liberate Caer Andros. On March 24, the army of the west camped in the dreariness of the Morannon, and Frodo and Sam made their last journey to the feet of Mount Doom. March 25. At the Slag Hills the army of the west were surrounded and fought in the Battle of the Morannon with less than 6,000 men total. During the morning of that day, Sam and Frodo reached the Crack of Doom, where, at the last moment, Frodo, under the influence of the ring, claimed it as his own. However, at that moment he was attacked by Gollum, who seized the ring and then fell into the fire with it, thus destroying the ring. Because of the destruction of the One Ring, the army of the west were able to achieve a very decisive victory. Frodo and Sam were rescued by Gwaihir, Landroval and Meneldor and taken to Ithilien. There, Caer Andros had been retaken. 2 days after the battle outside the Black Gate, words of Sauron's defeat had reached north, and the Easterlings who besieged the mountain lost hope. Seeing the morale of their foes being sapped by news of victory in the south, Bard and Thorin, the crown princes who led the defenders, managed to lift the siege and drove the Easterlings out of Dale and back to the east. The next day, Celeborn and the forces of the Galadrim crossed the Anduin and took Dol Guldur. Galadriel threw down its walls and purified the forest. On April 6, Celeborn and Thranduil met in the midst of Mirkwood and renamed it Aren Lascalen, the Wood of the Greenleaves. With the forest cleansed and Sauron's forces destroyed, the forest was divided. Celeborn claimed the southern part of the forest north to the Narrows, Thranduil took the northern part of the forest south to the mountains, and the two elf lords granted the middle to the Beornings and Woodmen. After being healed and having rested for a month, the ringbearers were honored on the field of Cormallen on the 8th of April. The following events are worth to mention as the final events in the War of the Ring. 1st of May, Aragorn was crowned as King Elessar. Elessar and Arwen got married on June 25. She had set out from Rivendell with Elrond on the day of Elessar's coronation. On the 22nd of July, the funeral escort of King Théoden set out from Minas Tirith and the funeral was held on August 10 in Edoras. The same day, Éomer announced the betrothal of Éowyn to Faramir, the steward of Gondor and prince of Ithilien. Left out of the final stages of the War of the Ring and unable to be of any use to Sauron, Saruman eventually managed to convince his captors, the Ents, into letting him and Grima leave Isengard on August 15, as the magic of his voice still remained. On their way north, on 28 August, they were confronted by Gandalf, Celeborn, Galadriel and the Hobbits, who were on their way from Edoras. They passed as traveling beggars as Saruman kicked Grima to move on, and he exclaimed how he hated his lord. Saruman and Grima turned towards the Shire. Celeborn and Galadriel departed to Lothlorien on September 13, as the others set out for Rivendell. September 21 they reached Rivendell, and the following day Saruman entered the Shire. On October 5 Gandalf, Frodo, Sam, Merry and Pippin left Rivendell. Saruman established himself in Hobbiton and spent his final days as a small-time thug lord, imposing a terror regime to avenge himself upon the peaceful halflings. But even this operation fell apart after Frodo and Sam returned. He was eventually betrayed and killed by his own agent Grima on 3 November, thus ending the War of the Ring.